Welcome back. In the last lecture, we created scores from the coefficients of the PD model. With this new knowledge, we are able to assess how a borrower's credit score changes depending on his or her residence, mortgage status, or any other piece of information. The information about the total credit score can give us an indication of a client's credit worthiness. So far, we've used the PD model to calculate the probability of default or the probability of non-default of individual borrowers. But logically, we can also use the credit scores to calculate the probability of default of individual borrowers. And that's what often happens in practice. Your FICO score is nothing but a measure of your probability of default. So overall, whether we have PD model coefficients or credit scores is irrelevant. They both serve the exact same purpose, the only difference is the scale. To determine what the scores per dummy variable categories should be, we summed the minimum and the maximum possible coefficients and used the minimum and the maximum desired score to transform PD model coefficients to scores. Using the same information, we can reverse engineer the sum of the PD coefficients from the credit scores. Now, this sum of coefficients is useless per se, but it's exactly what we needed to raise an exponent in order to calculate the probability of non-default. Alright, so how do we actually take a credit score and turn it into a probability of default? Well, by using the exact opposite arithmetic operations that we applied to turn the sum of coefficients into score. First, from any score, we subtract the minimum score. Second, we divide that by the difference at the maximum score and the minimum score. Third, we multiply by the difference between the maximum sum of coefficients and the minimum sum of coefficients. Last, we add the minimum sum of coefficients. Great! Now the only thing we have to do to obtain the probability of being a good borrower is to raise an exponent to a power equal to the sum of coefficients and divide it by 1 plus that same sum. Good job! Now let's compare the probabilities of non-default obtained straight from the PD model and through the credit score for a few observations. The probabilities are very close. But why aren't they equal? Well, because when we determined the scores that each dummy category would contribute to the overall score, we rounded them. And indeed, the differences are negligible. Okay. Now we know how the probability of being a good borrower can be obtained directly from the credit score. Fantastic! In our next lecture, we will finally learn how to decide whose loan application will be granted and whose won't. Thanks for watching.